Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for coming out to the Gravenstein Apple Fair, our 46th annual Apple Fair, which is Farm Trail's primary annual fundraiser. And our boiled down mission is to support agricultural diversity, Farms Forever in Sonoma County. So we're really grateful that you're here to celebrate our agricultural bounty and to be part of this amazing conversation that I can't wait to hear. I'm going to introduce to you now our very beloved guest MC, who is a food advocate and enthusiast and maybe evangelist. Is that fair to say? A good food consultant for sure. Our very good friend Clark Wolf. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. So have you had a Gravenstein yet? Have you had one yet? You really need to. They are, I have to say, we've been talking about this. This is a benchmark year. That I just took a bite of a Gravenstein. That was the best Gravenstein apple I've ever had in my life. And I've only been coming here for about 25 years. So I don't know very much. Today we're going to talk about taking care of food. We're going to talk about taking care of culture. And we're going to talk about taking care of our lives, of our community. Our first guest is Maya Harjo. She's an indigenous food and farming specialist, an organic gardener and educated, dedicated to restoring native food systems through the revitalization of traditional foodways and the practice of sustainable agriculture. Please welcome Maya.
Hi, everybody.
Maya has her own fan club, right? Her own fan club, possibly a Facebook page and an Insta. Maya, let's start the conversation by saying, what's your short answer? I was going to say elevator, but it would be a grain elevator, right? Your elevator, when people say to you, what is the Cultural Conservancy, and how did you personally come to it?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. We're both so grateful to be here. And just to first acknowledge that we are sitting on Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo lands, now the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria on their ancestral territories. Right. And I came to the Cultural Conservancy as an urban Native youth looking to connect to food and also surfing the internet as you usually do. Instead of going, I didn't really have any elders to talk to about how to do this stuff, and so I was just like making Google searches of like how to be better Native.
I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, and found the Cultural Conservancy doing this amazing, it's a Native-led organization that does incredible intercultural and intertribal work to really revitalize our cultural traditions.
We love when that happens. Let's give her a really big round of applause for finding her way back to her heritage. You know, I was born and raised in Southern California, and I live in Northern California and in New York City. And for a long time, I was very confused about where I should be and what I should do. And it turns out I'm supposed to be right here, right? We're supposed to take the integration of all of our lives together. But Sonoma County is where I really found out what I feel connected to. It's really what I found out, where I found out that my people in Moldova had orchards and not redwood trees, but forests. And why do I feel like I should live in a 100-year-old loggers cabin by the Russian River, right? Because it's in me. Our next guest, and we're going to continue the conversation with both of them, is Melissa Nelson. She's a Ph.D. of I guess the degree is Indigenous Food and Farming. Ecology. All right, she's a native ecologist, writer, media maker, and Indigenous scholar activist. She is the president and CEO of the Cultural Conservative. Please welcome Melissa. So, Melissa, you probably didn't surf the internet to find your job, but it's possible. Tell us a little bit about how you describe the Cultural Conservancy and how did you come to be there?
Like Maya, I was a young mid-20-year-old person, revitalizing my own indigeneity as a mixed-blood person, a member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa tribe, Norwegian ancestry from my father, and I had just completed my bachelor's degree in ecology and was very interested in serving Native communities in California, where I was born and raised. Right. So I always really honor the first peoples of this land land and acknowledge the Pomo and Coast Miwok people who are with us today in the audience. So thank you, and the wonderful folks from the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center who did a beautiful presentation.
Beautiful presentation.
And shared their yummy acorn bites and acorn fudge or brownies were delicious. So I found this organization, the Cultural Conservancy, is a very integrated, holistic organization that looks at environmental protection and cultural revitalization and spiritual connection to place, and we integrate all of that. And so we have programs mainly focused around food, because food is one of the best ways we connect to land and environment. We eat the food every day. We eat the environment every day. And so it's a great way to reconnect to our heritage and to our ancestry. And we also do work around sacred sites and protecting sacred lands. And we're intergenerational. We work with both youth and elders. And we like to be interspecies as well, working with our non-human and more than human relatives, like the acorn and the salmon. And for us as Ojibwe or Anishinaabe people, Chippewa people, all those names are the same tribe. Chippewa, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe. We have wild rice, which is the food that grows upon the water, called manomen, the good grain. And I think we have our beautiful ally brother, Ian McFowle, who brought us some wild rice.
Let's hear it for wild rice. And for Ian, please take a quick bite and pass it along. Melissa, why don't you talk to us about the rice for a moment?
So this is an incredible grain. It's actually a rice that grows literally on the lakes of Minnesota, the Great Lakes, between U.S. and Canada. It is in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, covering 4 states, 3 provinces. It is part of our prophecies. It's part of our migration stories, going back to at least 1,000 years, when my people had to leave the East Coast and were told to move west because there was an evil wind coming across the ocean and it was going to impact our people on the East Coast. So we had to move inland. And they said, but Creator, how are we going to know when we find our new homeland? And our prophet, who translated Creator's spirit, said, you will know your new homeland when you find the food that grows upon the water.
There you go.
And we came through the Great Lakes and found the good grain manomen wild rice that is deeply nourishing and an important part of our totem foods and food security.
And not to mention absolutely delicious. Nutty
delicious.
And rich and full. So Maya, tell us a little bit about foods and your culture and where you connect to what you eat.
Sure. So my people are Muskogee Creek, Quapaw, Shawnee, Seminole, and Delaware people. We are all, the reason why I have so many tribes is because we are all together right now in Oklahoma, where we were forcibly removed. And originally we're from the Southeast, most of us. And I think through farming and reconnecting with my ancestral foods and native ancestral foods across Turtle Island, I've been able to kind of access that ancestral memory I have of being ancient mound builders and agricultural societies and having this very deep-rooted connection and reciprocal relationship to foods like corn, to foods like beans and squash and others. And so we work on revitalizing those seed relatives and make sure that we're reconnecting them to their original stewards.
You know, there's sometimes a misunderstanding, and certainly it's propagated by some who talk about native peoples as nomadic, which is really ridiculous when you think about how much was planted and harvested and why the movement happened and how it happened. And some very snippy lady in New York said, well, they were nomadic. It's okay if we took the land. And I said, do you live only in New York? She said, no, I have a place in Palm Beach and one on the islands. And I said, so you're nomadic, so we can take your house. Is that okay? and she stopped looking at me. Anyway, right? I mean, we have to say those things. So, Melissa, let's start. Are there any other actually misconceptions that you can help clear up? By the way, my first experience with the term First Nation, which I happen to love, was when I was visiting in Canada, and they kept saying First Nation, and then it was that they were here. You were here first. It's really normal. I wish we would start using that term. The Canadians have all kinds of good things that we can share, right? But tell us, are there other misconceptions that relate to the culture that really would be helpful for us to dispel?
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, let me count the ways, right? There are so many misconceptions. The Hollywood Indian, right? Who knows about Indians from cowboy and westerns, Indian movies, right? That's where people learned about cowboys and Indians. That's all wrong. All of that is
all
wrong.
Of it. Every bit of it.
Yeah. And here in California, people think they're all gone or they're extinct because anthropologists and historians said those things. Native peoples of the California, native peoples of Turtle Island, which is the traditional name we use for North America.
Turtle Island is the name of North America.
Yes, to many
Sums
of
it up.
our traditional creation stories, and we are still here.
Yeah.
We may look a little different. We may not fit your stereotypical image of the rural stoic Indian with the feathers and the war bonnet, and especially California Indians, Pueblo Indians. We have such great diversity. We are not all one.
Right.
We are connected through trade and kinship routes, but the diversity of like native California right here with the Bodega Miwok, the Jenner Pomo, the Marshall Miwok, all these little valleys and areas had these little microclimates and different languages. So the diversity is incredible.
We have to pause. Microclimates. Where have you heard that before, right? I mean, the wineries have been talking about microclimates for day one. It turns out it's something in our history of our land and of our peoples, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So the diversity of Native peoples, first of all, is huge. The survival, resilience, and as we say, the indigenuity, the creative resilience of Native people is something that's huge. We are not victims. We are survivors and thrivers. And we have mixed with our colonial ancestors, many of us as well. So we walk in many different worlds. Many of us live in urban areas now as well. That doesn't mean you're any less Native American if you live in an urban area. You don't have to live in a teepee and ride horses to be a real Native American. And so, I mean, there's so many misconceptions, but those are a few big ones.
I was going to say those are the top ones. Maya, tell us specifically about foods besides this beautiful rice, which is really wonderful. And by the way, have any of you ever popped wild rice, like popcorn? Oh my gosh, you have to try it. It's the most delicious, right? It's you pop it and you put it in your bag and you go for a hike, and it's nourishment and it's delicious and it crunches and doesn't stick in your teeth nearly as much as corn. But Maya, specific foods that these nice folks can focus on that might really help the effort to preserve and bring forward some of the traditions.
It's hard to choose just a few. There's so many.
Keep talking.
I think another important, before answering the question, I just think another important part of that is understanding that you can be a part of the revitalization and the protection of Indigenous foods and not necessarily have access to them yourselves too. So, for example, in California, you can be a good steward to the acorn, but if there are limited amounts of acorn, that is the true nutritional food that sustains Native Californians and who need access to it, and whose the priority is for them to get access. So you can still Daisy, be
an activist,
and a supporter, be a part of that, and support communities in that way. There are a lot of foods, though, that we do share with other communities, including there's plenty of heirloom beans and heirloom corn seeds. There are a lot of seeds that come from the Southwest, from Southwest tribes that were grown in an arid desert environment that we work a lot with in California as we're going through climate chaos and having to work with these seeds that in their memory have the resilience and adaptability that we need in order to combat climate change. Right. So there are plenty of organizations, including our own, the Cultural Conservancy, that work to revitalize these heirloom seeds that can help us mitigate climate change.
So if we see somebody that's part of a native group at a farmer's market, just buying that food helps support the effort.
Definitely.
All
yeah. Buying that food, supporting economically, supporting environmentally by being good stewards of where you live and being good people of place. And
you know, one of the things I love about this, it's so not typically so-called American to be totally non-direct transactional. You know what I mean? You're talking about doing the right thing and letting it go out there, and you're acknowledging it the same way somebody buying something would do. And that's what we have to start thinking about, right? Doing the right thing is putting it out there for everyone in a way that comes from your tradition. Melissa, tell us as individuals, as community members, how can we be in touch or support the Cultural Conservancy on a regular basis? What's the best way for a general public to support and be active with the Cultural Conservancy? And it's based in San Francisco, but has outposts in other places, right? Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, you can find out more information about us at www.nativeland.org. So nativeland.org is a great way to get information about our suite of programs, from global grant making to local youth programs and our Foodway flagship Foodway program, our media work. There's many different programs and ways for people to interface. Right. I want to really underscore what Maya said about supporting the food sovereignty of the First Nations, the First Peoples of the land where you live on, and that often means you don't consume it. For example, the abalone and the acorns and some of these endangered foods that really should be eaten and restored and used by the first people. It's their ancestral diet, their ancestral foods. And as Maya mentioned, there's ways to support the conservation of those resources without acquiring or consuming them.
You know, it's amazing. I mean, as a food professional, working with chefs and restaurateurs is a big deal all the time. And nobody learns faster, and nobody gets more excitement out of sharing those things. But part of what you're saying is, instead of just grabbing something I've never eaten before and trying to cook with it and sell it, know about it and respect it and cook something else. That's not an easy message to get across. Do you go to culinary institutions? Do you go to culinary schools? Do you go to, because in Sonoma County, we are very blessed to have a lot of culinary programs at junior high schools and at high schools, and at a glorious complete $22 million culinary center at the junior college. Is this something that, for example, if we wanted to get a speaker to come and give a class or to talk about those things, are you who we would come to?
There's a whole network called the Native American Culinary Association, and there are Native chefs. Two wonderful Bay Area Native chefs were referenced in the previous speakers, and from the Ohlone Cafe, Vincent Medina and Louis Trevino. They were just written up in the New York Times food section.
Whoa.
The Ohlone Cafe, and they're doing amazing education work.
And it's a pop-up, or it was a pop-up?
It's a permanent pop-up.
Yeah, you know what that means, folks? That means if it all falls apart tomorrow, it's okay. I mean, I really love that.
No, it means they regularly show up and cook when they have the materials available. These very limited, sacred, restricted materials, when they're able to share some of them with them.
Exactly.
Crystal Wapapa, who also worked with California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. The Sioux chef Sean Sherman's getting a lot of attention from Minnesota. He started a cafe. He's been written up in New York Times. We also work very closely with the Slow Food Turtle Island Association a network of native food chefs, producers, farmers, advocates, leaders. So there's many ways to get education out. The Cultural Conservancy is still a small grassroots organization. We welcome donations of food, of vehicles, of seeds, of allyship, of relationships that can help support our programs.
So sometimes the best thing is to go to you, and you will refer somebody to another organization or network that you're well aware of and that you think it would be better for us to do. Now, Melissa, do you live in San Francisco?
I live in Coast Miwok territory in the shadow of Mount Tamalpais, also known Marin County, named after Chief Marin.
All right.
Yeah, and I work in San Francisco in Ramaytush Ohlone territory. That's where our office is based,
right.
But we work also very locally. We have just been very blessed to acquire a property here in the Green Valley watershed that we are growing into a biocultural heritage area in an indigenous eco-village.
My gosh.
So we welcome contributions and donations for that on many levels. We need resources to make that happen. So join our vision.
I was going to say, we're going to talk about that offline. You're going to come on my radio show, and we're going to talk about that and promote. There are many people in this community who would love to support you. Maya, where do you live?
I just moved to Pomo territory off the Russian River in Guerneville.
All right. I live 2.5 miles above Guerneville or beyond Guerneville in a 100-year-old logger's cabin in the redwoods that's never going to come down because that logger wasn't going anywhere.
I'm in a cabin that might come down.
Oh, all right. Okay. I've got a spare bed. You can come
Thank
visit.
you.
All right. So you're now in the middle of our community. You're now in the middle. How long have you been here?
Couple months.
I was going to say, what time is it, right?
Yeah.
And where were you before that?
I was in Chochenyo Ohlone territory in Oakland.
I see. I love this. Every single time we get to have an education about what became before, and then you place it in what we know of as currently temporarily Oakland, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's so helpful to us. That really is the most wonderful thing. So if I come across young people who want to do something right here in Sonoma County, like next week, this year, this fall, any ideas? And waiting is an okay response. You know what I mean? It's okay to tell us, take your time, take a deep breath. We'll talk to you in 3 months or a year. It's okay. We've learned that finally. But young people come to us and say, hey, I want to help. I want to do something. What can I do?
I think you can support our new land project, which is currently between Grayton and Forestville. We have a lot. We have a piece of land that is calling for love and attention, and we need as many loving hands as possible.
So, and how big is it?
7.63 acres.
All right. Did any of you ever know Nancy Skull from Middleton Farm? Do you know who that is? Does anybody? Yeah, I see some names. Nancy is part of why I moved here, because when I visited here some years ago, I tasted strawberries that she was raising, and I started crying. And I said, I have to live here. She started organic farming at the age of 59 and died at 85. I think she left the farmer's market and went home and laid down. Do you know what I mean? There was something about what was in the earth. She had 8.1 acres and had so much food, it's unbelievable. A little over 7 acres is a sizable piece of nourished land, isn't it? It is
a sizable piece of nourished land. We also have a garden on the College of Marin campus, the Indian Valley campus of the College of Marin in Novato, California. And it's a small acreage, but we grow a lot of good food there. And we also have volunteer days there, too.
All right, so volunteering is an absolute possibility. And Melissa, give us a website where we can go again.
Yes, www.nativeland.org. We also have an active Facebook page, the Cultural Conservancy, and you can pick any of our first names, Melissa at Native Land, Maya at Native Land, and let's get a show of hands of other Cultural Conservancy team in the back.
Yeah,
Woo-hoo!
Let's hear it for them.
Wendy.
Thank you for being here and all that you
Yes.
do. Thank you so much. All right, listen, I want to be able to let you guys ask some questions, too. I love when that happens, right?
My name's Greg, and I had a taste of the wonderful rice earlier that they're passing around, but it has a very different flavor. I guess the new foodie term would be food profile, whatever that means, food profile. But it's very different than modern palate taste. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that, what the difference is between really old traditional food and modern food?
Thank you for that great question. So manoman, the good grain wild rice, grows on lakes, and it traditionally, like the one we ate, is hand harvested in canoes. Traditionally, there were birch bark canoes with cedar sticks that you knock the rice out of these beautiful grass seeds in the water and knock the rice into your canoe. Later, you bring it back and you parch it and you dry it, and then you dance on it. And you dance on the rice, and then you winnow it to get rid of the little chaff, and then you have this beautiful rice that is traditionally preserved in our birch bark containers that can last years and years. And so all of the love and prayers that go into that, and then it grows on beautiful freshwater lakes. Of course, many of them are getting polluted, many of them are getting dammed. So the taste of all that prayer and human hands loving that relative, that rice, is so different from the industrial attempted genetically modified wild rice that is farmed in Northern California in an arid environment with water stolen from rivers in Northern California into the Sacramento Valley and industrially harvested. There's a very different taste quality to all of that. And our bodies know, even if our minds don't, the wisdom of our taste buds really can feel the integrity and wholeness of the rice you just ate, as opposed to going to a store and buying very black, long looking wild rice that was paddy agriculturally grown with a lot of artificial inputs.
Can you also tell us how you prepare it and how you serve it?
Yeah. I want to give Maya more time, but it's super easy, just like any rice, but it's 3 cups of water instead of 2 to 1. So 3 cups of water to 1 cup of wild rice. And you have to rinse it a lot. You want to have some of the taste of the lake, but not an over taste of the lake. So you just give it a good wash and soak and rinse and massage. And then, you add it. What's great about it, just like Oneogan, the Iroquois white corn we also grow that you make a flour out of. You could either do sweet in the morning, which we love with berries and maple syrup, and you could do at night savory with mushrooms and tomatoes, bison, whatever. So it's very adaptable for breakfast and for dinner.
Maya?
I'm hungry. I would just like to add to everything Melissa was saying by saying that food is medicine, but part of the reason food is medicine is because of that relationship with humans and their stewards. And so when you have food that's grown in an industrial system, like a corn seed that never actually gets touched by a human hand, from planting to harvesting to distribution, that nutrition and that spirit in which the corn seed is nourishing us is lost. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. That's so wonderful. Another question? Yeah. Oh, is that a tree? Is that a person? Come on up. Okay. Tell us your name and your question.
My name is Sasha. I'm a chef down in the Bay Area, and I was curious, and just off of everything you guys have been saying, what sort of options, what sort of distribution is there for sort of what you would call authentic or traditional native foods or products? Like if I wanted to get my hands on some, how could I do that?
Thoughtfully, because you talked about the fact that sometimes not cooking it is a good idea,
Yes.
but if you did, thank you very much.
Or I guess to be more specific, what sort of appropriate products could I get?
There you go.
Well, there's many Native American foods that are available. We talked about many of the corn varieties that you can grow. If heirloom seeds that are grown by some of the local farms, we're certainly going to be growing them. We're growing them down at Indian Valley Organic Farm and Garden. So we follow the original instructions of the Honorable Harvest, which means you use or take what is only freely given. So when something is shared or freely given, then it's a good food to use. And a lot of native foods don't enter the commercial market because they have such sacred value, but some of them do. Bison, for example, there are a lot of native tribes in the upper Midwest who are carefully and traditionally growing, raising, and harvesting bison as a food source. And I know chefs can do amazing thing with bison and huckleberry sauce. So that's a wonderful food. Corn is one. Squashes are very available. There's so many varieties of squashes.
Just to give a little bit more specific organizations that you can turn to, there's the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, NAFSA, that has a lot of connections to Native-run organizations and businesses that sell food like this. There's also the Intertribal Agriculture Council, which also is kind of like a food hub that networks between Native producers. And let's see, who else? Anyone else?
Well, Native Seed Search, as a source of seeds in Tucson, Arizona, has done some great work. And then you really want to look regionally. In Santa Fe, Albuquerque area, there's the Traditional Native American Farmers Association that is a network of wonderful farmers that sell like blue corn flour that you can make beautiful tortillas and tamales and so many different things. Hatch green chilies. So we work with the chefs Lois, Ellen Frank, and Walter Whitewater. He's Dene Navajo and she's Kiowa. They have Red Mesa cuisine, and they do a lot of beautiful foods with the Southwestern foods. Sean Sherman up in Minnesota area does a lot of the upper Midwest, Lakota, Ojibwe, Dakota foods up there. And then in California, the Ohlone Cafe, they're really prominent here with the California Indian foods.
And your wonderful new piece of property, do we have an expectation of what might be grown on that property?
Everything. And soon.
Everything and soon. And will it be shared? Is it the intention to share it with chefs who might be able to cook with it?
The intention is to educate our community and share what's shareable. Yes, definitely.
And share what's shareable. Thank you so much. Thank you. Other questions? All right, I have a couple more. All right, so do you see anything in the food culture of Northern California that may not look like what it did at one time, but seems to come from some of the traditions that you have been supporting and bringing forward? I mean, corn obviously comes to mind. You see some horrible bag of microwave popcorn and you think, this is not how this started, right? But are there things that we could be aware of that vestigially have come into our culture that really belong someplace else?
Well, I love what Lois Ellen Frank always said. You know, where would Italian food be without tomatoes? And tomatoes are a native food of Mesoamerica, right? And where would Irish and European food be without potatoes? And they came from the Incan Empire of the Andes, and that's a native food that never gets recognition. Cacao, hello, chocolate, the Mayans and the people of Oaxaca is an incredible indigenous native food. As Vince Medina was quoted in the New York Times article, you know, coastal people of Turtle Island had bougie foods, right? Yeah. Oysters, crab, lobster, seaweed, right? All this incredible seafood that, again, Native peoples are not given credit for. Jacqueline Ross, a wonderful local California Indian person, speaks very eloquently about, you know, the protection of those relatives of the coastal foods that were part of the daily diet of the people here. And now, due to water pollution, climate change, poaching, they're very endangered. So that's a big concern.
I add to the Italian discovery of tomatoes, which I think is so wonderful. It's not, we don't have to denigrate their using them. We just want to acknowledge where they come from, right? Same thing goes with polenta, much of which is grown in the Dakotas, right? I mean, much of the corn for the polenta is grown in the Dakotas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the foods that the world has have been gifts of the Native people who have for thousands of years. stewarded them.
All right. So this is go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that's changed dramatically. I mean, when I started doing this work, say 25 years ago, people still had this idea of Native peoples like eking out a living with primitive food, like wildlife, just like wandering aimlessly, which was such a horrible stereotype that was so destructive. And finally now people are recognizing, of course, Native people had a sense of cuisine, had a sense of taste, of flavor, of food combinations, had a very profound culinary tradition that is finally getting recognized. And of course, today, after waves and waves of brutal colonization, it's a little different. It's a little adapted, but it's contemporary indigenous cuisine that is really authentic with the ingredients, but maybe using it in a more with a modern flair.
All right, we've talked about agriculture a little bit, but I can't help asking about foraging. I can't help asking about the natural gathering.
Do you want me to know? Okay. That's a very touchy one, of course, as well. It's kind of a trendy thing in the foodie movement to like go forage and get foods and, whoa, I just harvested these acorns or, these bay nuts or whatever it is. And again, it goes back to our philosophy and definition of food sovereignty, that the first peoples of that land, they have the rights to those foods first. Yeah. And if they should have access to them, whether you're on private property, a city park, a state park, a federal park. Access to those traditional foods should go to those local people to honor their food sovereignty and their thriving. If there's enough for them to share, they are happy to share because trees are abundant. Life is abundant when we let it be abundant and enhance it to be abundant. And then you can share with the outer community through trade. And then if there's even more surplus, then you can go to market, farmers market, sell to chefs, and have some economic development around it. So be very mindful and thoughtful when you're out gathering and thinking how cool it is to gather these, that there is a community, a local Native community, even if they aren't federally recognized, like the Ohlone people of San Francisco and Oakland, who are hungry for those foods, who could benefit from those foods. So we're partners with the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center.
Wonderful group.
Wonderful site. And they have beautiful forest lands that they're tending very well with the blessings and participation of the Great Rancheria. They gather acorns every year, they gather bay nuts every year, and they gift them to the Great Rancheria so that they can do what they need to do with them, to cook with them, prepare them, have feasts with them. And then if they want to share back, they often do.
Melissa, I can't tell you how much we appreciate hearing that there are steps that we want to think about before we go to market. It's wonderful to understand that, and we have to listen to that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say also, when there is an abundance of food that can be shared and people go out and forage, you have to really mindfully forage in a way that proliferates the life of the plant or the animal that you're foraging and doesn't take away from that. So there are ways to collect seaweed that doesn't kill the plant, or there's ways to collect other plants that a lot of people who are unknowledgeable in these things or don't care about these things, they'll take a plant out by their roots and thus end that food source for everyone.
I say a little bit more about that, because it's so wonderful to know that as with everything else, learning a little bit more before we do anything is a really good idea. So say I'm a trendy chef or a young person who's just starting out or something, and I want that was a great example about the seaweed. Can you give us other examples of how we need to learn a little bit more to respect the source?
Absolutely. I mean, there's Yerba Buena tea. There is Labrador tea up north of here. And people will just go and strip the bushes clean and pull them up, like as you said, by the roots, so they will not continue for another generation. People will go and take every acorn they can find off of a tree and not leave them to drop so the next generation will come up. And I've heard from many Native people, a lot of Paiute in the high desert with their pine pine nuts. They've been really hit hard by climate change and not producing enough pine nut. And they'll say, they often go and they'll just assess that there's not enough pine nut to gather, and yet they still go and sing to them and pray to them and make offerings to them. And they may take one or two symbolically to say, we remember you, we know you nourish us, but they won't even harvest a basket full because that plant needs to replenish and take care of itself.
Which, of course, leads to the conversation and the question about climate change. It's something that we all talk about, but from the perspective of your organizations and your efforts, what might we think about?
Water is so key, right? Water conservation, water revitalization, water restoration. So we're lucky to work with many of our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. Our Cultural Conservancy Board Chair, Kaimana Barkarsi, is here with his family.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Thank you.
And people who live on a little island and their love of water and the appreciation of the fresh water and able to enhance it in many different ways. So we want to be capturing water, rainwater. We should not be having rainwater run off in the streets and get polluted by oil from cars and gas. We should be protecting our water, as Brock Dahlman, who's the founder of the Water Institute at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. We should be slowing it, spreading it, sinking it to rehydrate the aquifers and then sharing it. And so terracing, we have to do a lot better management of our water that we get here in our winter times. So water is key to prevent some of the catastrophic flooding and prepare for the droughts by having enough stored.
It is kind of interesting, and Maya, I want you to tell us more about it. Since we had some droughts, a greater thought has gone into it, quite frankly. And even though the flood was significant, it really, many of us who are in that river region recovered very quickly because it's part of nature. We accept it. We don't get upset and call everybody to fix it for us. What else is important for us to be focused on?
Fire. California is a native fire ecology, and fire was an integral and still is an integral almost species that belongs here and that is necessary for the abundance of the state we live in. And fire has kind of been demonized by a lot of people as this big, bad, scary thing. But fire isn't inherently evil. It is not of demonic hellfire. Fire is a being that we can have good relationship with and pray to, and California natives know that best, and had a relationship and have a relationship with fire that allows for all species in our ecosystems to thrive.
I want to say something about that, if I may.
Sure.
And that is that it is very important to us to understand that fire and flood is part of our lives, right? That we live in nature. I live surrounded by redwood trees, and I know that if one falls, it's their turn, not mine, right? And I have a fairy ring on my hillside, and somebody said to me, what are you going to plant? And I said, I live in the woods. I'm not going to plant anything. I'm going to let the woods do what the woods do. So I want to invite you to be involved in something that we're doing this fall. You know, we call it the summer season and the holiday season. We're focusing on early September to early November as the grand harvest season. It's a time when in Sonoma County there's been a lot of attention towards grapes, but we really want to focus on the other harvests, both agricultural and natural harvests, and we want to invite you to be a part of the Sonoma County Grand Harvest. We would love you to do whatever you can and to help you do whatever you are doing, and maybe we can really help with that property, because I know a bunch of people with the weekend off. All right.
Thank you. Let's talk.
Festival.
Oh, we do have a harvest festival.
Good. Let's hear about it.
Sure. We have a harvest festival on October 5th.
See?
Yes.
That's the time.
At Indian Valley in Novato. So if you, again, go to our website, nativeland.org, and sign up for our newsletter, you will be able to receive emails about all of this.
Well, and we're going to put you on our site on the Sonoma County Grand Harvest and make sure that people really know about this gathering and plan to come in a thoughtful way. Is it a full day, a half day, 2 days?
It's full day. Yeah, it's a full day.
All right, good. A little bit like the Gravenstein Apple Fair. Yeah. Have you both been to the Gravenstein Apple Fair before?
First time.
Same.
All right. Well, it's wonderful to have you here. Let's hear it for these wonderful individuals who are taking care of us every day. We have a few more minutes if there are any questions, but otherwise I like to let you guys come up and talk to these wonderful people. If there's a question, let's hear it.
Thank you for coming. My name is Clayton Stewart Wadler Barker. My ancestors are Celtic, Viking, Druid, Saxon, and Teuton from the Swiss Germanic Alps. And my question is related to that because, the medicine women of Europe, the witches, over 6 million were killed and raped in the witch hunts. And part of what I see is the problem with patriarchy and the struggle for guys who look like me to decolonize our egos is that we lost a lot of our medicine women during the witch hunts, and then that was brought over here. And one of the things I struggle with is figuring out what's the ideal diet that I can eat that's going to decolonize my ego in today's world. Because I've already given away everything except for what I can carry on my back. I just have 2 bags of material possessions. I went for eating without... I didn't eat at a restaurant for 7 years because I was trying to give up eating capitalist vibrations in food. And I live kind of poor. I don't have too much money, and I'm still trying to see how I can decolonize patriarchy and my ego and myself to awaken my divine mother and feminine energy to be a better example for other white men in this culture, or lost Indigenous European American men, I sometimes call us. So what do you think's the ideal diet for someone who's homeless, doesn't own much land, and doesn't have much money to grow food? Like, what kind of diet can we eat to decolonize our ego if we don't have too much resources to grow food or agreements to forage food or something like that?
Thank you. You're learning about our ancestral foods, right? Now, you have your own ancestral foods, and you really need to return to those ancestral foods. Look what your grandmother cooked. Look what your great-grandparents grew and cooked and ate for their celebrations, for their events. That's the food of your ancestors. That's what your genetic material, your DNA is made up of. And that you have to listen to your own body. Everybody's bodies are unique. And some people love the paleo diet. They can eat 90% meat and can't eat vegetables. Right. Others can eat 99% vegetables and can't eat meat, right? We're all different beings, and we change over time, our metabolism. So it's really, you sound very thoughtful to listen to your own body and to really look back and do the research into your own ancestral foods. And that's what we're saying. We're saying don't eat our ancestral foods. Let us eat our ancestral foods. Help us lead our ancestral foods. You guys all have your own ancestral foods too. And yes, it gets confusing when you're mixed blood people, mixed race people, right? But you have to listen to your own body and listen to your family and what nourishes you, what nourishes your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit.
Thank you so much. Let's hear it for them again. Thank you so much.